We're hours away from the Mamdani apocalypse in New York City, New Jersey, Virginia, heading to the polls. The continued fallout of Tucker Carlson, Nick Fuentes, and just the internecine war gripping the MAGA coalition and the American right. Plus, the great Dave Rubin of the Rubin Report joins us later in the program. I'm Josh Hammer, and this is today's episode of The Josh Hammer Show. Today is Monday, November 3rd, and it's not just New York City, it is the entire American people, the entire American polity, from sea to shining sea, as the case were to be, is waiting with bated breath to see, will they actually do it? Will the people living in the nation's largest and most important city actually elect a Karl Marx-quoting, communist, Hamas-loving, crazy, radical, Uganda-born 33-year-old dweeb to be the next mayor of the nation, to my extension, the Western Hemisphere, and frankly, the world's most important city? Zohran Mamdani continues to lead in virtually every poll. It is a three-way race between Mamdani, Andrew Cuomo, the former governor, who's trying, albeit not really, his heart doesn't really fully seem to be in it, but that's a story for another day, analysis for another day. You have this three-way race between Zohran Mamdani, the former governor of New York, Andrew Cuomo, trying to do this comeback, alongside Curtis Sliwa, something of the perennial Republican gadfly candidate going on for many years now. The good news for Mamdani's foes, and there are many foes, is that the margin does, at least in some polling, seem to be shrinking. So a recent Atlas Intel poll from last week has Mamdani only up 7 percentage points on Andrew Cuomo. I saw some other poll over the weekend cited by the Cuomo campaign that has Cuomo down by only 6. Look, I can't believe I'm going to say these words, honestly. I really can't. But if you live in New York City, I'm sorry to say it to Curtis Sliwa, but you have to vote for Andrew Cuomo. You really do have to get out there and you have to vote for Andrew Cuomo. At this point, this is not an ideal scenario. We are hours away from the most radical big city mayor in the history of the United States, other than maybe Brandon Johnson, Chicago. I mean, talk about a ridiculous choice there. But with that possible exception aside, I'm not even sure I buy that exception there, talking about the singular encapsulation of the nefarious red-green alliance, of the intersection of Marxism and Islamism. You're talking about someone who is trying to double the minimum wage to $30, get municipal-run grocery stores, who's trying to do these massive tax hikes there, punitive redistribution policies there. You can't let that happen. The bad news is it's probably going to happen. I mean, the poly market odds continue to be really high, over a 90% chance of victory, according to most online betting markets. We had Joe Borelli, the former Republican leader on the New York City Council, to break down all of that on Friday's show. Go back and watch or listen if you have not already done so. But there's still a chance. Again, it does seem like in these final hours of the campaign that the American people, or the New Yorkers really more generally, specifically, are starting to come a little bit back home to their senses. Now, the debate continues to unfold very much in real time as to exactly who Zohran Mamdani will be. We think we have a pretty good idea as to who he is at this time, at least on paper. But who exactly is he going to be? So it's a very interesting interview that I noticed from CNN. Jake Tapper speaking with Hakeem Jeffries, the Democratic leader in the House. Hakeem Jeffries, who has now formally endorsed Zohran Mamdani. He is urging that New Yorkers elect Zohran Mamdani. Go ahead and watch this exchange on CNN between Jake Tapper and Hakeem Jeffries.
For mayoral candidate Zohran Mamdani, do you see Mamdani as the future of the Democratic Party?
No, I think the future of the Democratic Party is going to fall, as far as we're concerned, relative to the House Democratic Caucus and members who are doing a great work all across the country as it relates to our need to both take back control of the House, but in doing so, make sure that we're communicating to the American people like, we understand you deserve better.
All right, so very interesting. Hakeem Jeffries actually trying to distance himself at least a little bit, it would seem, from Zohran Mamdani. No one knows what to expect from this guy when he is mayor in terms of what he can actually accomplish. He certainly has his starry-eyed, Pollyanna-ish, pie-in-the-sky vision as to what he hopes to accomplish in New York City. Namely, he wants to transmogrify it into a Marxist dystopian hellhole. But it is fascinating to me that the leader of the Democrats in the House is taking at least some mild, mealy-mouthed steps, albeit after an endorsement, to try to say that actually, no, maybe the future of the Democratic Party is not necessarily going to be this one guy, this one Hamas-loving, jihad-sympathizing, Karl Marx-quoting radical there in the Big Apple there. So that actually, I thought, was quite interesting. Now, another one-time radical, now semi-pragmatist, you might say, by current Democratic Party standards. The one-time radical who is now also there out on the campaign trail, hitting the phones, all that, the whole soup to nuts operation being whipped out on behalf of Barack Obama, now for Zohran Mamdani as well. You know, this was actually very interesting. Barack Obama recently at a campaign rally, this campaign rally was actually in Virginia. It actually was not in New York City, but I think it has a lot of salience for the New York City mayoral race nonetheless. Barack Obama talking about how Republicans never miss a chance to scapegoat, you guessed it, minorities, DEI, all of that. Go ahead and watch this from Fox.
They put on a big show of deporting people and targeting transgender folks. They never miss a chance to scapegoat minorities and DEI for every problem under the sun. You got a flat tire? DEI. What they have not devoted energy to is helping you. They have not put forward serious proposals to lower housing costs or make groceries more affordable.
All right, so that was Barack Obama this weekend in Norfolk, Virginia, campaigning on behalf of Abigail Spanberger, the unfortunately likely next mayor, if you believe the polling, there in the Old Dominion, the Commonwealth of Virginia. But if you do live in Virginia, make sure to get out, certainly, and vote against Abigail Spanberger, namely vote for Winsome Sears, and definitely make sure to vote for Jason Miyares against Jay Jones, who infamously once called for the murder of his political opponents. Jason Miyares is likely to win the Virginia Attorney General election. Unfortunately, we cannot necessarily say the same thing for Winsome Sears, who is trailing by quite a bit in the polling. But this quote that we just heard from Barack Obama, it seems to me like this has massive salience, not just for the Virginia gubernatorial race or any Virginia race, but really, I would say above all, for the New York City race. He's still talking about DEI. Because this is what Barack Obama does. Barack Obama is the intellectual godfather of the woke DEI intersectionality identity politics movement. He was the progenitor, the hope and change guy of 2008, the guy who famously brought together this coalition of aggrieved interests, as we call it here on the show, this coalition of Hispanics and black people and young people and college grads and the Upper West Side, the San Francisco, Los Angeles, Beverly Hills, PhDs. This bizarre coalition that exalt your identity over your ideals. But fundamentally, what could be less American than that? And the worst part about it for Barack Obama, who is still ironically bitterly clinging, y'all remember that from 2008, Barack Obama talking about how these folks, I believe he was speaking at a rally in Pennsylvania, if memory serves, a swing state that year, how these folks are bitterly clinging to their guns and their religion. Well, Barack Obama, at this point, is now bitterly clinging to his 2008 hope and change woke DEI intersectional garbage. Because that coalition, no matter what happens tomorrow in New York City, no matter what happens, that coalition is dissenting. Republicans continue to make massive inroads when it comes to the black vote, when it comes to the male Hispanic vote, maybe above all, a statistically significant, essentially a dead draw in the presidential election last November between Trump and Kamala Harris. That coalition is dying, regardless of what happens in New York State tomorrow. But certainly, again, far be it from me to say vote for Andrew Cuomo. I can't believe, on the one hand, these words are coming out of my mouth, but it's the only option at this point, folks. I'm sorry to be the bearer of bad news. Curtis Sliwa has no chance. Frankly, I think it is astounding hubris that Curtis Sliwa has not dropped out of the race. I have no idea why he is still in the race, other than to satisfy his own ego, or there's been a lot of speculation about the campaign finance elements of his staying in the race as well. But if you want to stop Zohran Mamdani, the way to do that tomorrow has to be Andrew Cuomo, and we're still hoping that Andrew Cuomo pulls this off. Again, words I never thought I would ever say, but such is life. By the way, right across the Hudson River, the New Jersey gubernatorial race, which is also at the polls tomorrow, another tightening race. So that same poll, the Atlas Intel poll from last week that showed a tightening New York City mayoral race that showed Mamdani just up 6 to 7 points, give or take, on Cuomo, now shows Mikey Sherrill, the Democratic candidate for governor of the Garden State, up by just 1 point on Jack Ciattarelli. So on my social media feeds and in my circles, this whole weekend was just flooded with photos and images of folks knocking on doors and phone banking and campaigning for Jack Ciattarelli all throughout the state of New Jersey over this past weekend. He's narrowing the field. He's actually really genuinely getting this a lot closer. Now, as we mentioned previously, he only lost the gubernatorial race 4 years ago, the same person, Jack Ciattarelli, to Phil Murphy, the current Democrat governor. He only lost by a little over 3 points. At this point, he is getting very, very, very close to that. He has yet to lead in a major poll that I have seen, but he is very much now going into Election Day with the wind at his back, maybe even more so than the New York mayoral race, which, to be clear, Zohran Mamdani, disaster. We'll get into that a little bit more with Dave Rubin a little bit late in the show. But maybe even more than that, the action item for you as the viewer or listener of our program, especially if you live in the Garden State, if you have relatives in the Garden State there, make sure they get out there and vote for Jack Ciattarelli tomorrow. That would be an unmistakable message to have this light blue state that is trending in the mid to long term slightly more towards the right. It would be an unmistakable message to have that state boot out the reigning Democratic Party in Trenton, the state capital, and to insert Jack Ciattarelli there. I'm not saying that Jack Ciattarelli is perfect. He is very far from perfect. But he is probably the best you're going to do out of a light blue state like New Jersey. What a tremendous, tremendous result that would be, and certainly it is very much what we are hoping for here on the Josh Hammer Show. I had a lot of friends text me over the weekend there that the momentum on the ground is real. I am not in New Jersey. I cannot see it for myself, but certainly based on what I see on social media, seems to me like he is going into this with the wind at his backs. Far be it from me to make a prediction there, but I think it's going to be a really, really, really close race. And I am genuinely excited to see what happens there in the New Jersey gubernatorial race tomorrow. Now, another story that I want to talk about, and we touched on this on Friday's show as well. This, for better or for worse, is the story that I just can't seem to get away from. I kind of, on the one hand, really do want to get away from it. We are on the cusp of electing this Marxist Islamist radical as the mayor of America's most important city, America's flagship city on the world stage. There are massive elections in Virginia and New Jersey tomorrow as well. But the firestorm and the dust-up and fallout, all of the above, it all continues in the aftermath of Tucker Carlson, the erstwhile king of cable news, turned right-wing provocateur and gadfly, if you can even call him right-wing at this point. The attention continues to focus on this now infamous interview that 1 week ago, last Monday, Tucker Carlson did with Nick Fuentes, who is the leader of his own online army of neo-Nazi trolls called the so-called Groypers. Nick Fuentes, who is, at this point, we can probably say has probably surpassed David Duke as being the nation's most infamous Holocaust denier. Not just a Holocaust denier and a dripping Jew hater, by the way. Nick Fuentes is also astonishingly racist. He has called Vice President J.D. Vance a race traitor just for having the audacity to marry the love of his life, an amazing woman, Usha Vance. Just a disgusting slob of a human being. He has said that women actually want to be raped. Incidentally, if you want a full rundown of all the various insane things and disgusting things, abhorrent, appalling things that this little stupid, closeted homosexual troll Nick Fuentes has actually said, you can actually then go over to our longtime friend Ben Shapiro, who has a whole episode on this today. So I do recommend, after you finish with this, then you go ahead and watch that show as well. But last we checked in, we discussed this a little bit on Friday's show. The Heritage Foundation, the longest-standing think tank on the right, currently led by Kevin Roberts, who is a personal friend of mine. Kevin came on our show in the first year of doing our show, probably about 3.5 years ago or so. I actually was also one of Kevin's very first guests on his show, The Kevin Roberts Show. In fact, to this day, if you go to the Heritage Foundation's headquarters in Washington, D.C., you go to the basement floor, the ground floor, and you walk down one of the aisles, you will literally see a photo hanging on the wall of me appearing on The Kevin Roberts Show. So I say all that because it brings me no pleasure whatsoever to talk about the horrible, horrible situation that Dr. Roberts has put himself and his institution in with the fallout of this Tucker Carlson Nick Fuentes interview. For context, Kevin, following his predecessor, K. Cole James, who was an ineffective at best and a deeply squishy at worst president of the Heritage Foundation, after the K. Cole James era, when Kevin first came in to run the nation's most important conservative think tank, starting in early 2022, he started to turn the organization in a more relevant direction, in a more MAGA-friendly direction, a more Trump-friendly direction, whatever you want to call it. Among the things that he did around the time that Tucker Carlson was still the king of cable news on Fox News was to begin to embrace Tucker Carlson. In fact, at the gala for the 50th anniversary for the Heritage Foundation, a gala that was in April 2023, outside D.C., a gala that I personally attended at the Heritage Foundation's invite. I was there. Tucker was actually the keynote speaker, and they did that right around the time he was fired from Fox. It was actually literally 3 days before he was fired from Fox News. And since then, Dr. Roberts and Heritage have welcomed in Tucker Carlson into the embrace of the organization. They have used donor money, it seems, to pay for wildly overpriced advertisements on the Tucker Carlson show. And in this now infamous video that Kevin released last Thursday, which frankly looks like a hostage video, that was my read of watching this video, he says that Tucker Carlson will always be a friend of the Heritage Foundation. And to be clear, the video is astonishingly bad. It is egregiously bad. It is one of the most profound acts of moral and political cowardice that I have ever seen in my entire adult lifetime. And it turns out that his now former chief of staff, who has since been demoted, possibly fired, the rumors are now swirling, was the one who actually wrote this speech. A truly absolute piece of garbage that individual is, and he has now paid the price for it. But the buck ultimately does stop with Kevin Roberts for giving this astonishingly bad speech, dripping with some of the most unmistakable, egregious, anti-Semitic, you can't even call them dog whistles. I mean, these are siren blasts that you can hear for a country mile. These are not dog whistles. Referring to Tucker's foes as a venomous coalition serving someone else's agenda. Who could that agenda be? Who could those people be? The fundamental problem is this. What Kevin is trying to do, and what Tucker's various defenders after this Carlson Fuentes dust-up are trying to do, is they're trying to defend Tucker's decision to have this conversation while still saying that, Fuentes is still a punk, we don't agree with him, but let's have the conversation. But the problem actually is only to a small extent with Nick Fuentes. The problem is Tucker Carlson. By saying that we're not cool with Nick Fuentes and we want to defeat his bad ideas, but we're actually okay with Tucker Carlson, you're basically saying that we want to defeat Hitler and the Nazis, and the way to do that is to double down on more programming by Father Coughlin. Father Coughlin, who was the most infamous anti-Semitic broadcaster in the FDR years in the pre-war era, spreading horrific libels and slander against the Jews. Tucker Carlson has become the number one progenitor, propagator, and disseminator of toxic anti-American, anti-biblical, anti-Western civilizational ideals. The problem is not really Nick Fuentes. The problem is Tucker Carlson. And unless and until Kevin Roberts, the Heritage Foundation, and all of the American right, all of MAGA, all of the conservative movement, unless and until we all come together and realize the absolute moral monster, the unmistakable coward, and just the hideous broadcaster that Tucker Carlson has tragically descended into following his ouster from Fox News, unless and until we all have that reckoning. Dr. Roberts, Vice President Vance, all of Tucker's close allies, unless and until we have that, this is going to keep on happening and happening and happening, because they will not be satisfied until the Jews are kicked out of the right, Christian evangelicals are severely diminished, if not kicked out altogether, and MAGA is destroyed. That is their goal. And here on this show, we're going to fight back repeatedly, and we're not going to let that happen to the best of our abilities. Well, what a thrill to bring back on now a 3 or 4 time. I've lost track of how many times he's been back here on the Josh Hammer Show, but our first time bringing back Dave Rubin onto the program in our new daily video format. So he really needs no introduction, but Dave Rubin is the host of the wildly popular Rubin Report. Find that everywhere you get your podcasts on the interwebs these days. He is to be found on X over at Rubin Report. Dave Rubin, my good friend, welcome back to the show.
Josh, I thought you were going to say 3 or 4 time NBA All-Star, which is true. 1991 to 1994. People don't remember. I was a bench player, but nonetheless.
Dave, remind me to tell you before I lose my train of thought. I actually declared for the NBA draft. I don't even know if you knew this about me. I literally declared for the NBA draft after my junior year at Duke University just to see if there was some NBA general manager stupid enough to see, oh, some guy declared early out of Duke? Who is this? But anyway, story for another day, my friend. We're not going to bore the listener.
It was you or Grant Hill. Okay.
Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly.
Made the right choice.
I think they did. Okay. So actually, news of the day, not NBA draft, the side that the people of this show care about, is, among other things, the possible Zohran Mamdani apocalypse coming tomorrow in New York City. I've been talking about it on this show a lot. I know you've been focused about it on your show a lot as well. My folks live in the New York City suburbs, which is where I grew up. I think your folks still live, at least primarily, in the New York City suburbs, where I know you grew up as well. This issue is pretty close to home, Dave, for both me and for you. It's pretty crappy on the one hand. On the other hand, I see a lot of folks say, oh, this is actually good for conservatism. It's good for team civilizational sanity. Let New York City kind of go to hell in a handbasket. Where do you come out? Are you rooting for New York City to burn, or is this actually a bad thing that should be stopped?
No, there is nothing good that can come out of a Mamdani win.
Agreed.
This is a disaster for New York City, an impending disaster, and an absolutely catastrophic disaster for the entire country. So, look, I get the argument. Which is you've got to get this woke Marxist, communist, jihadist thing to its end volition, get it there, go to the gates of hell and let it happen, and then people will realize and a phoenix will rise out of the ashes. I get that argument. I don't think everything has to go that way. And the idea that the once greatest city in the world, literally in the world, not just in this country, the once great city of New York is about to go down this path unless a miracle happens tomorrow, which, look, it's politics, anything can happen. I mean, there's just no evidence pointing to a Cuomo win here, especially if Sliwa stays in, but anything can happen. But they are on the precipice of ushering in all of the bad ideas in the very city that has the Statue of Liberty, the statue that she's holding a little tablet there, and it talks about the poor and the tired and the huddled masses yearning to be free. Well, guess what? All of those people that came, like our ancestors that came to Ellis Island, they came fleeing the very ideas that the city is importing right now, which is communism and giant government and control over every part of your life. And now there's also the dash of jihad element with Mamdani. So this is an absolute disaster. And to the backdrop of, 24 years after 9/11, I was in New York City during 9/11. My dad worked in New York City, saw the second plane hit. There are so many, and just when you think about where the culture wars are at the moment, this is only a disaster. They might be able to fake it for a year, right? You can fake the budgets for a year and the free buses and the rent-controlled apartments and some in the free grocery stores. Maybe you can do it for a year, but after that, it will collapse. And this is a guy who wants to defund the police. This is a guy who won't condemn Hamas. I mean, the list goes on and on. It cannot get much worse than this. He is a wolf in sheep's clothing. And I would say to New Yorkers, good luck with all of that. And Josh, correct me if I'm wrong, but Florida, as of midnight tonight, is closed. Is that correct? I saw that somewhere.
Dave, as someone who is not yet a first-time homeowner, I am hoping that you are right. I am hoping that Governor Sanders puts up it's genuinely kind of nerve-wracking, but hopefully that big closed sign gets up there on the Florida-Georgia line, or I guess at 35,000 foot on the LaGuardia to Miami Connect or whatever.
Well, look, Josh, I saw an article in New York Post this morning. They are predicting that, assuming he wins, that 1 million New Yorkers will leave. Now, let's say they're off by even if they were off by half. Let's say it's only 500,000. the amount of those people who are upper income earners, who are the very same people that Mamdani wants the cash from, who are likely functional citizens who, produce things and work at jobs and all those things, and they're going to take their riches, and I don't mean that just financially, they're going to take their good lifestyles and everything else and their law-abiding nature and their, let's say, right-leaning politics, and they're going to bring it down to Florida. We're going to get the win out of this. Now, as someone that doesn't own a house yet, you really might want to end this program now and buy a house like this second, because the prices are going to go crazy. But Florida will once again be strengthened, and New York will then have to rely even more heavily on the depleted, tax earners there. So it's just disaster after disaster after disaster.
So you think it's going to be that bad? And the reason I say that is because, Dave, we just had Joe Borelli, former Republican leader of the New York City Council, on the show on Friday, and he thinks that Mamdani will get past maybe half at best of his agenda. A lot of it has to go through Albany, the legislature there, but I'm not sure that really matters, right? Because it's at least the perception of the whole thing just being totally gone and going down the tube. So the perception will be there before the reality, so I guess the reality doesn't matter there. So you think it's actually really that bad? So potentially
yes,
a million...
Because, Josh, there's something that's well beyond the policies and whether the state legislature is going to fund things or stop him or something like that. The ideology itself is so rotten. It's what it does to the people. Right. So you are going to institute class warfare, right? So the landlords will all be considered evil, and the peasants will all be considered the good guys, and they will constantly be at each other's throats. This is someone who wants to defund the police. This is someone who in the last 2 days basically said that he's proud that New York City is a sanctuary city. So they are going to also import new voters for the purposes of the census. That's something that Elon's been talking a lot about. At every level, it doesn't matter if he can implement the entire agenda. It will become a city that is more friendly to all of the bad ideas. And then it will also become a place where good people simply will not be able to exist anymore. They just won't, because at any given moment, we know this, the Democrats can turn the violence and the riots and everything, all of it, they can turn it on and off as they please. So the second he wants violence, there will be violence. If he doesn't want violence, there won't be violence. It's going to be a disaster.
We're chatting, folks, with Dave Rubin, host of the wildly popular Rubin Report, available everywhere podcasts are available. Dave, what is your most dire prediction? I mean, I've kind of joked on the program that the Wall Street Bull might become a real-life bull and literally start walking out down the Lincoln Tunnel, walking towards Miami or Dallas, Texas, or something. I mean, what is... I'm joking, obviously, but... Well... What is your wildest prediction, whether it's human flight, social capital, financial capital? Kind of paint the picture in addition to just 500,000 to a million, whatever it is, people leaving. What do you actually see happening?
Well, there's the obvious financial implications that we've already talked about, right? You keep removing people who produce and who pay taxes, and then you keep telling everyone else that everything's for free. Obviously, the math there doesn't work. I mean, the real one would be that he puts on some sort of mask, and then he walks outside of Wall Street, and he says, "I give the city back to you." That was a Bain impression. I thought that was pretty solid. Did you catch that, Hammer? Yeah, that was pretty good. I mean, I just think it could create a series of, well, look, you want to go really dark, there could absolutely be pogroms against the Jews. He is instituting all of the anti-Israel, which is really just anti-Jew stuff. The landlord versus the person who rents is deeply, deeply dangerous class warfare. I just think everything could go off the rails really quickly. You want to defund the police at the same time, and you want these free buses. Well, guess what? Okay, free buses. Now all the homeless people, when it gets cold, we're about to hit the winter in New York. It's pretty cold out right now. Okay, congratulations. All the homeless people who usually sleep out on the streets, and that's not great either, but now they'll just be on the buses or on the subway. Why wouldn't they do that? They've already, the thing is, New York City has degraded already to a point that good people just don't go on the subway anymore, right? Or a certain set of people just don't walk around at night anymore. So it's not just that everything collapses at once, as many people point out, things start slowly and then happen very quickly. And that really is the thing that we have to watch out for. When is the accelerant? And this guy is basically sitting there with, a match and an oily rag going, well, we'll figure it out.
Now, I did see a poll over the weekend that had Cuomo only down by 6 points. I mean, part of me just wants to yell at Curtis Sliwa and say, what the heck are you doing here by actually staying in this race? But that's a conversation perhaps for another day. But assuming that Mamdani does pull it off, which he is still overwhelmingly likely to do, 90+%, the most of the online betting markets, if you look across the Hudson River to New Jersey, there is a tightening gubernatorial race tomorrow as well. Jack Ciattarelli is rapidly gaining ground on Mikey Sherrill, only down by 1 point in one poll that I saw there. At least in my social media feeds, Dave, the stuff I'm seeing out of New Jersey is pretty inspiring. I mean, massive crowds for the rallies, the door knocking there. So if Mamdani does pull this off, and if the nation's largest city falls to this red-green alliance, intersectional, Marxist, Islamist kind of caricature of a left-wing being, if that actually happens, but if Jack Ciattarelli pulls it off across the river in New Jersey, does that mitigate kind of our stress and outrage, or does New York City really kind of just make the headlines and therefore make the importance? Well,
it doesn't mitigate it in terms of what New York City means to the world. I think it is a massive loss to the world. It's an emboldening moment for all of the bad guys. Everyone that's into the Red-Green Alliance across the world, if they see, boy, well, we got London already because we got Sadiq Khan, and it's not really the London that any of us think it is anymore. We kind of got Paris already. Like, there's a bunch of European cities that don't feel the same anymore, that everyone just knows they aren't. Now we got New York, so it will really embolden the bad guys. Now, from the perspective of someone that grew up in the tri-state area and has most of my family, although I grew up in the suburbs of New York, most of my family was actually in Jersey. Jersey going red again and getting a little, Ciattarelli, give me some like Tony Soprano style, like stand up for yourself, with a couple F-bombs, that would be great. And also, by the way, then at least it causes some of the New Yorkers who flee probably just go to Jersey instead of coming down to Florida. But I look, although we've been a little bit black-pilled here, I will say this. The founders intended these laboratories of democracy, and if New York so chooses this, as horrific as I think it's going to be, and people should make choices accordingly, this is what democracy and federalism is all about. So it is bizarre. We might lose New York City, and then you might get the state right next door, which will suddenly start going the right direction. Florida will probably become stronger because of this. We see if he wins, does that embolden this guy, what's his name in Minnesota that's running, Omar Fateh, who's just another version of Mamdani. Maybe he then gets enough juice to win there. So we lose Minnesota, but then, a certain amount of people from there move to Texas, and then it turns out to be making Texas stronger. So there is some interplay when it comes to how the system works here that, thank God, the founders knew what they were doing.
One of my favorite quotes, Dave, is this wonderful quote from the early 20th century newspaper columnist, I guess you call him a social critic, H.L. Mencken. And he famously said that democracy is the theory that the common man knows what he wants and he deserves to get it good and hard. Yeah. And to be clear, he was mocking democracy. He actually was kind of making fun of it, but there's a lot of truth in that there. And New Yorkers are about to get it really good and really hard if they really do decide to elect this truly radical guy there into Gracie Mansion and the New York mayoral office.
Let me just make one other point on this real quick, because a lot of people are saying, oh, well, look, okay, it's been a slow degradation of a place like London, so that it won't all happen overnight in New York. Now, again, I just made the argument that you can fake the budgets and that sort of thing for a year, so it might look kind of good. There might be a patina of sanity for like a year. The other argument, though, would be that the forces of leftism and now of Islamism and the rest of it, they've been so emboldened over the last 20 years that bringing this guy now is very different than bringing Sadiq Khan in a couple of years ago, because the forces are stronger. So he may just go all in on the insanity very, very quickly. By the way, this is also a guy who says that he will abide by the International Criminal Court, which is completely disqualifying. You, as a public servant in the United States, your oath is to defend the Constitution of the United States, not some fabricated clown court that none of us are beholden to, and yet he is saying that he will abide by that. I mean, there's a million reasons he shouldn't even be allowed to run, actually.
No, very astute point. There's actually a famous Supreme Court case that a guy by the name of Ted Cruz actually once argued back when he was Solicitor General of Texas. Back then, which established the principle that these international courts and treaties are really not particularly binding, actually, on the United States, because we are bound to the Constitution, as you say. It was actually one of the greatest legal victories that Ted Cruz had back in his legal days, and Zohran Mamdani would, do well to actually read a little bit about that. But Dave Rubin, folks, is the host of the Rubin Report, which you can find everywhere on the interwebs. Dave, in our remaining time, I do want to touch on something else, which I also spoke about at the beginning of the show. I know that you've spoken about it as well. It's admittedly a less fun topic, but it is not lacking in importance. And this is this ongoing internecine fighting within the broader right. Some people call it a civil war. It seems a little overstated to me. But our mutual friend Ben Shapiro released a whole episode this morning going to the mattresses, as they might have said in The Godfather, against Tucker Carlson and this Nick Fuentes platforming and this whole movement that some folks call the woke right. I don't really get obsessed with the nomenclature myself, but it's rapidly escalating is the point here, and there's the whole overarching context of this video that Kevin Roberts, the president of the Heritage Foundation, released as well. First, let me just get your basic take, because there are a lot of folks that are saying, conservatives, stop the sniping, stop shooting at each other there, just focus on our real enemy, the left, especially with Mamdani, New York City there. So what is your basic take on that particular reasoning, that particular logic?
Well, my take on that argument would be that would be nice if some of the people, such as Tucker or this Fuentes guy or some of these other ones, would ever go after the left. But they actually only go after people on the right. They go after MAGA incessantly. They never say anything good about anything happening on the right or any of the good wins that Trump is doing. On my show every day, it is very easy to talk about Trump wins, whether it's on the border or with immigration or with ICE or with the trade deals or with what he's done in the Middle East. And the list goes on, removing wokeism from our institutions. I mean, we can do this all day long. The incredible people that he has in his cabinet, from, Bobby Kennedy all the way down, like how great so many of these people have been, and that we almost handed this country to the worst of the worst with Kamala Harris, and we got the president we want, who has leveled up from the time before. It's very easy to talk about all of the Trump wins. I love the fact that there is a wide tent MAGA movement that has brought in disaffected liberals like me and Elon Musk and Joe Rogan and Tulsi Gabbard and Bobby Kennedy, and that can also work with more traditional conservatives like you and Ben Shapiro and many others. That's an incredible thing. That's what America's about. That's actually what MAGA's about. I think that actually encapsulates probably 80% of the country, because Trump isn't so crazed on some of the social issues. He sometimes governs a little more big government, but he is truly proud of America. He's showing that America leads again, that he is America first, but not America alone. Like, it all kind of works. And then there's this set of people, but I would largely make this about Tucker, which, as I have said repeatedly, brings me no pleasure. I considered Tucker a friend. We have done each other's shows over, dozens of times. He blurbed my first book, which was about classical liberalism, not about conservatism. He credited me for going independent because he saw how successful I became by doing a show in my garage. I tried to reach out to him privately several times to hash some of this stuff out. But I would ask Tucker and any of the people that are sort of on his side of this, well, are you for America at this point? Why can't you ever do a show that is pro-America? Put aside Israel, put aside the Jews, all of those things. And by the way, I mean, if you think you can defeat the Jews or disconnect the Jews from America, wait to see what happens to America on the other side. I mean, this is the story of all time. So, and by the way, the Jews are going to be fine. Like, ask Pharaoh how it all worked out. Like, it doesn't end that well for these societies that turn on their Jews, because Jews are the canaries in the coal mine. And I think a lot of people are realizing that. I think JD is actually realizing that a little bit as he's seen some of the attacks on his wife. I think Vivek is realizing that as he saw some of the attacks on his family after he put up a picture with his kids for Halloween. So it never stops with the Jews. But putting that aside, the right now should be in the most celebratory possible place. We got the president we wanted despite everything. He's actually trying to drain the swamp. He cleaned up, the Iran thing. Tucker said World War III and thousands of American deaths and everything else, which JD did needle him on a little bit in that speech the other day, that Turning Point speech. There's so much goodness here, but these people, when we finally have the president we want, doing so many of the things we want to do, want to burn the whole thing down. So as it pertains to the gatekeeping part of this, look, I don't consider myself a conservative, really. I'm an old school liberal who happens to have a lot in cause with the conservatives. But if conservatives can't have some barriers on who is part of this or not, I don't know, how the hell do you conserve anything? You only conserve things by saying, here's the things that are good, and they must be conserved. So Tucker, I have heard nobody call for Tucker's deplatforming, that he shouldn't be on YouTube or X or anywhere else, and really for the same thing for the little gay Mexican guy. Like, I haven't heard anyone say any of those things, but what I have heard is people say, we're going to criticize you for your bad ideas, which, by the way, Tucker is criticizing plenty of people. He's going after Ted Cruz. He's going after Mike Huckabee and everyone else. So he's trying to set his battle lines. Other people are setting theirs, and they're just crying about it the entire time.
Yeah, criticizing speech is not a form of cancellation. It's just another form of the exercise of free speech. I mean, how that is not astoundingly obvious to everyone out there just continues to baffle me.
Well, Josh, I mean, these aren't good actors. I mean, most of these people are not good actors, you know, and I would include Tucker in that. And again, that does not bring me any pleasure. He keeps name checking me in his shows, but refuses to have me on. Like I offered multiple times privately. I offered to broker a piece with him and Ben about a year ago privately at first. Ben agreed and Tucker did not. So what he does is he brings on, Dinesh D'Souza has been pointing this out, he brings on all of these guests to launder his bad ideas and never say really what he thinks. But then over time you can kind of glean what it is. And unfortunately, I think it's real. I would put it this way. If Donald Trump is paying attention to any of this, the threat to your legacy, Donald, Mr. President, is what Tucker is trying to do. He is trying to destroy MAGA. And guess what? Regardless of what side of this you fall on, if you are anywhere on the right, if MAGA falls right now, we end up with AOC or Gavin Newsom or somebody even worse as president. So if that's what you want, and maybe that is what Tucker wants, I do think that's a possibility, actually. But Trump better be paying attention to this thing.
No, it has all the potential in the world to destroy the movement, which is, I would argue, what their goal is here. Their goal is not just to kick the Jews out of the right. That is definitely part of the goal. But when Tucker Carlson tells Nick Fuentes that his number one enemy, the people that he hates more than anybody in the world, are not, trans Tifa or not Boko Haram or Al Qaeda, but are Christian Zionists, which, by the way, his own father, the late Dick Carlson, self-identified as a Christian Zionist. I don't know the exact numbers, Dave, but probably a plurality of the MAGA voting base of the current Republican coalition are Christian Zionists. He's trying to blow the whole thing up.
But Josh, it's also just like a nonsensical, the way they've brought the word Zionist back in some sense is just completely crazy, because that just means someone who thinks Israel should exist.
Right.
I assume Tucker thinks Israel should exist. The Zionist movement started before the modern state of Israel to reconstitute the ancient land of Israel, right? So for him, he's a Christian Zionist unless he's saying Israel shouldn't even exist. But also to the backdrop of losing our friend Charlie Kirk only, 6 weeks ago or whatever it is, barely. Charlie was the most fervent Christian Zionist in the country. So if you're trying to honor his legacy and Tucker's going to these Turning Point events, Turning Point's going to have to make a decision as to which way they want to go. He's dancing all over his grave. It's disgusting.
No, literally no one did more to try to destroy Charlie Kirk and, frankly, his now widow Erica Kirk over the years than Nick Fuentes. No one caused Charlie and his wife more hell over the years than Nick Fuentes. So for Tucker to bring on Nick Fuentes a month and a half after Charlie's horrific assassination is not just the act of a moral coward. It is the act of a horrible, horrible friend and someone who is betraying his friend's legacy.
So I'm with you on that, Josh. But look, Tucker, I'm a talk show host. You're now a talk show host. We can bring on whoever we want, and I treat all my guests the same way. And sometimes people like the interviews I do, and sometimes they don't. But if Tucker cares for Charlie in any way or Charlie's legacy, and you still, let's say he still wanted to bring on Nick Fuentes, then wouldn't you then question him? Why is it that you said, and play some of the videos or just quote some of the things that he said about Charlie, some of the things he has said about J.D. Vance, some of the things he said about Vivek, some of the things he says about Jews. But he didn't. He launders all of the lies. So he wanted to give him a patina of respectability, and I suppose to a certain set of people that worked. But let me just say one other thing on this. 10 or 15 years ago when I was leaving the left and I was part of what they called the intellectual dark web, and there were a few of us that were the sort of sane liberals trying to push back against the woke thing. We had no institutional backing. It was purely grassroots. It was like 10 of us on YouTube, me and Jordan Peterson and Sam Harris and Gad Saad and a couple other people, Douglas Murray, and we were trying to push back on the excesses of the left. And it didn't work because there were no political leaders willing to help us. Everybody was afraid. What I have seen in the last couple of days is that conservatives are willing to stand up right now. Right. So there is a huge pushback. A little bit of it is confusing because of the way the algorithms work and the bots, and people think you win an argument just because you get more clicks from a Pakistani bot and everything else. So I would put some of that aside. What I have seen is that by and large, conservatives, and I mean small c conservatives, are principled, good, love America, and will withstand this crazy onslaught that's designed to destroy MAGA and ultimately the country.
Well, Dave, one of the things that I love most about you, my friend, is that you really are the consummate white pillar. And at times when I wanted to spare,
It's the tequila.
Right. It is the now award-winning tequila. And by the way, congratulations, mazel tov, as we would say. Everyone go out and get Copal. I'm not sure how you pronounce it, but Copal. It is delicious. I downed the whole bottle, frankly.
You were the first
far
person
too quickly.
You were the first person I ever gave a bottle to, actually, because we got it delivered the day you came to my house.
Well, I remember that this past March, and I drank it way too quickly because it was genuinely good. I'm not even a tequila guy. I'm literally a whiskey guy, and I actually loved Dave Rubin's tequila, Copal, so much. Go out and get a bottle, and also make sure to subscribe and watch to the Rubin Report, the wildly popular show of today's guest, Dave Rubin, a dear friend and the consummate white pillar. Dave, thank you so much, as always, for joining in for your great insights.
Good to see you, Josh. Everything's going to be fine. Don't worry. It's the story. They hate us, we eat. All right.
Everything's going to be okay, and thank you, as always, for tuning in to today's episode of The Josh Hammer Show.